Good morning. All right, good. All right, welcome. Welcome to worship with the community of the First Parish in Lincoln. We're so glad to see you here in person in the sanctuary, and also welcome to our members who are on Zoom. For those of you who are physically here, thank you so much for observing the taped off pews, a creation of our Safe Congregation Task Force, who have been working very hard for 2 years now to preserve our collective well-being. So the church goes back to 1740s, and our present community was formed in 1942 by the coming together of the Congregational Church and the Lincoln Unitarian Church here in town. We strive to be inclusive and welcoming, and to encompass a wide range of theological and spiritual beliefs, whoever you are, whomever you love, whatever you carry with you in your heart. Please know that you are very welcome with us here today. For those of you who are Zooming, we invite you to put your prayers into the chat, and we will read them during the community prayer time. The flowers today are given by Barbara Leggett in loving memory of her husband Tom on his 96th birthday. So there we are. So let us deepen into worship with our opening words from Sarah.
I invite you now to rise as you are willing and able. We have come into this room of hope where our hearts and minds are opened to the future. We have come into this room of love where we know that no lives are insignificant. We have come into this room of song where we unite our voices in the somber and beautiful melodies of life. Now I invite you to join in singing our opening hymn, which is found in your order of worship on the next page. Sing praise to God who has shaped. Now would you join me in a spirit of prayer? Holy One, liberator of the captive and lover of the outcast, may your spirit move among us. In the face of collapsing ecosystems, the nightmare of war, lawmakers abusing people of oppressed genders, and ongoing brutality against people of color and Black folks, may we in this space be fixated on the sacred possibilities of a world rich in justice and overflowing with love. Do not let us get distracted from the causes of our neighbor or swept away by a spirit of despair. May the kingdom of heaven be co-created through deep roots of solidarity, communities meeting each other's needs, and joyful expressions of multifaceted identities. In the shared pursuit of this task, let us worship. Amen. And would you join me now in saying the words of our covenant? In the love of truth and in the spirit of Jesus, we unite for the worship of God and the service of all.
Our first, our first reading today is from the autobiography of Nelson Mandela. He writes, "I have walked that long road to freedom. I have tried not to falter. I have made missteps along the way, but I have discovered the secret that after climbing a great hill, one only finds that there are many more hills left to climb. I have taken a moment here to rest, to steal a view of the glorious vista that surrounds me, to look back on the distance I have come. But I can only rest for a moment, for with freedom come responsibilities, and I dare not linger, for my long walk is not ended."
Good morning. Morning, Dan. Baptism at an early age, I do not recall. Oh, take my mask off. I do not recall baptism, but from then on, Sunday school, PF, and later the First Parish congregation and this space have been a key part of my life. From Sunday school, my memory is of a lighthouse project with Charlotte Phillips, a neighbor who became a good friend. She led us through the process using a paper towel roller, wires, battery, and a bulb. While the link of the lighthouse to the Bible or the class may be forgotten, the thrill of turning the switch and having the light illuminate is not. 6 ministers, going on 8, each bringing strong support and challenge to the congregation. A lovely and quiet space here for reflection, open to all. I often come to just sit and reflect, to connect with family and friends. Now with all the electronics, I hope we'll be able to figure out how to continue this approach. Participation of all in so many ways, noticed and incognito, just done because it needs doing. Witnessing generations of committee chairs and leaders at all levels, especially my mom and women of her generation, taught me a lot about decision-making, seeking consensus, and confronting challenges amongst a community of friends. Accepting and seeking diversity, diversity of race, diversity of thinking, diversity of LGBTQ, diversity of culture, and lived experiences. This is not such an easy task as the concept buzzes on so many levels. What a lot of good people and families have been present here during the past 75 years. And the beat goes on. So wonderful to see new members last week owning our covenant, and signing the member's book. As the prism shines, I love the colors which take me back to Kirsten Lundblad, a student minister who gave the congregation the prism upon her departure. To Dave Donaldson and the countless speakers who have expounded upon the impact of this wonderful element in this marvelous space. I'm excited about our next steps, so I'll close with a selection from Nate Klug's Hosts and Guests poems. Potholes. Though chipped and complex as oak knots, when potholes saturate with rain, they resolve to a black, unbroken sheen, like hundreds of filings pulled flat, magnetized. And messenger bikes get but a second to swerve. Wrapped in a billboard tickered with real-time quotes or levels of alert, the rider snaps his head back to the erratic ground itself, to the chance of the earth's opening up, blasting through macadam and dirt, these chest-wide trapdoors which might, for all he can see, just keep going down. Buster Keaton, Yellow Wolf, and that ferryman's dog, all 250 enemies of Moses, swallowed by God, or else it's worse. The deepest pits on Market Street exist to light the way back up for every narrative we've paved and girded over, or never even learned, the jealous limbs reaching toward the surface breaches. I don't think a pothole will ever be quite the same again.
All right, thank you, Rob. We come now to the time in our service which we set aside for prayer, both silent and spoken. To prepare ourselves remaining seated, we will sing hymn number 318 in the gray hymnal. Following the hymn, we will take 2 minutes for silent prayer, meditation, and reflection, followed by a time for spoken prayers from the congregation. Please remember, if you're joining us remotely, that you can type your prayer into the chat and it will be read this morning. Thank you. And now, if anyone would like to share a prayer, please raise your hand, and one of us will come to you with a microphone. Please remember to hold it really close to your mouth. Thank you.
A prayer of peace for Jeannie Welsh, whose brother Mark Hardcastle passed away 4 days ago, and for the whole Hardcastle family.
We pray for the spirit of Banner Valentine. May he be free and rest in peace.
A prayer for Nagar Moore, who died last week, and for her daughter Layla, and for the whole family. Nagar had been a teacher in the Lincoln schools many years ago. Amen.
I speak for my Susan today, a prayer of gratitude for Tom Leggett, who was such a wonderful extra dad to my Susan for so many years. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Tom.
And from the chat, Marianne Hales offers a prayer to bless and protect my children, grandchildren, and friends far and near. Mike O'Brien asks that we pray that all of us will devote our deepest reflection to how we might constructively build and support a domestic and foreign policy that will support our own freedom going forward and the freedom of all peoples, especially those in Ukraine and the former Soviet republics. Sarah Cannon Holden, oh, that we could fix the potholes in Washington with the return to the collaboration demonstrated by Senators Kennedy and Hatch, both now deceased.
Spirit of life and light and love, we give thanks for this day, for this new opportunity to be together in a space, a sacred space where so many have gathered before us, seeking the embrace of this beloved community that gathers in your name. We come to seeking its beauty and peace. We know we can rest here for a while beneath these stately windows, taking in the light that filters through the ancient panes and glimpsing trees and bushes beyond that are about to burst once again into leaf and flower. This space is truly a sanctuary within a sanctuary. In the world, in the natural world, that surrounds us just outside of this building and these windows, we are blessed every morning not just on magical moments like last Sunday's Easter sunrise service, to witness your recreation of each new day, and to feel deeply the interconnectedness of all of our lives with all life and with all other lives. We come seeking peace in a world that, for most of our fellow humans, sees little of the garden. It's no wonder that we turn our hearts away from its landscapes of alienation and hostility, of privation and destruction, from nightmare forebodings, of once unimaginable horrors. But let us not use this space as an escape, but more like a temporary retreat in which we can rest a while and replenish our spirits in order that we can return to our broken world with renewed determination to find ways to make it more whole. We ask you to open our minds to deeper understanding and to unlock the imagination of our hearts, that we may truly honor our call to ministry, to affirm the dignity of each person in deed as well as in word. We know that that work will take the patience and perseverance of many lifetimes, but we must dedicate ourselves to it once again, now, today. Great Spirit of life and love, we ask your blessing on those who devote their whole energies and talents to this highest and most fundamental of human callings. We give thanks for their work. Help us to learn from their wisdom and from the joyful spirit that animates it, that we may truly also, like them, love our neighbors as ourselves. May it be so. And now please join me, if you wish, in saying our unison prayer. You'll note the Lord's Prayer has had a couple of adjustments, which I truly love, although I may stumble into the old words. Our parent, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. But deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever and ever. Amen.
Thank you, Mary. Now, at the time for the offering, will the ushers please come forward to receive the morning's offering. For those of you on Zoom, you can support the First Parish by mailing your contribution to the First Parish in Lincoln, P.O. Box 6218, or to 14 Bedford Road, Lincoln, Mass. 01773. Thank you. We give thanks for both these gifts and for the givers, and we ask that we may use these gifts wisely and well, both to nurture the life of this congregation and to further the goals of justice and peace throughout the world. Amen. Please be seated.
Hello, I'm Joan Mansfield, and I wanted to share with you a little bit of our own families, or I should say, my first stumbling steps along the First Parish racial justice journey. Most times, like the hobbits in Tolkien, we have mixed feelings about leaving our comfortable and familiar homes to set off on a quest which we're not sure we want to undertake, and which is likely to involve some surprises and discomfort. My family's been in Massachusetts since 1630, and my mother was very proud of that. She worked hard to round out what she'd learned and put it into a book for the family, The Life and Times of Our Illustrious Ancestors. There was a story about the man who died of wounds he got in the swamp battle of King Philip's War in the late 1600s. His wife raised their 8 children by herself. The stories are of brave and determined people overcoming challenges. But the stories are not so simple as they appear in her book. Let me share one family story. Samuel Forster Tappan was born in 1831 in Manchester. As a 23-year-old abolitionist and self-trained journalist, he attended the Boston trial of an escaped enslaved man who was captured and returned to the South under the new laws which demanded that people who had escaped be returned to the slave states as property. Tappan was appalled at the injustice he was witnessing. He decided to devote his life to ending slavery and moved with abolitionist friends to Bloody, Kansas, which was deciding whether to be a free or a slave state, and fighting about it. He was involved in setting up the Underground Railroad in Kansas. In the Civil War, he joined the Union Army as an officer in Colorado and fought in the Tri-Corner War in the Southwest between the North, the South, and the Native American tribes who were desperately trying to hold on to their land in the West. While he was in the fort with a broken foot, his unit attacked and murdered Native American men, women, and children who had surrendered and were living near the fort. He reported the Sand Creek Massacre, or the My Lai Massacre of its time, to the Washington newspapers, and a controversial court-martial resulted. Later, he adopted a 10-year-old Native American girl survivor from another massacre and brought her back to Boston to be raised by his sister. I can only imagine her loneliness and grief in this strange new culture after being pulled away from her own community by the people who had murdered her family. She was educated in public school and enrolled in Howard University, but died of tuberculosis as a teen before she could begin college. I'm sure Tappan felt he was doing a good thing. He continued to do what he thought was right. After the Civil War, the Navajos were driven from their homeland and were starving in the land that they'd been put on, which could not support harvests of corn. Tappan created and co-signed the treaty which finally returned the Navajos to their homeland. But again, the story's not so simple. Tappan then founded one of the first, now infamous, Indian schools in Nebraska. Perhaps he believed that the Native American people could only be part of America's future if they buried their own culture and became useful as good workers, although second-class citizens in the white world. So that's the story. Was he a hero or a bad guy? He was certainly brave and committed to his beliefs. He lived in a world different from our own. He wrestled with the moral dilemmas of his time. He did both very good things and very bad things. And I'm sure he believed he was doing the right thing. We all have family stories. Our stories are intertwined. Many Americans are immigrants, willingly or not willingly, from Europe, Africa, and Asia. The Europeans stole this beautiful country from the indigenous people who belonged to this land for thousands of years. Slavery is a foundational part of our story, and economic justice persists. This is the American story. Our ancestors shared with us a hope that their lives, or at least their children's lives, would be better, that America could fulfill its promise and become a more just and perfect union. So as I continue my own journey, I'm grateful to the racial justice group at First Parish, who are helping me to open my eyes to my New England history, and who are dragging me out of my comfortable habit hole, first to understand who I am, and then to begin to learn how I can help this country become something closer to the more just America we imagine is possible.
Good morning. I'm Ben Wells. That's a hard act to follow. First, I also share gratitude to this church, this organization, for leading me down a path that I probably otherwise would not have been exposed to, and I appreciate that. So my racial justice story starts out in a suburb of Detroit. Both the town and my family were pretty racist. I'll spare you the details, but there were no black kids in my schools until high school, and then only one, Sid Barthwell. And it never occurred to me that Sid and I might have anything in common, that we might seek to become friends. We were middle class, I was told. We weren't millionaires. We lived in a modest house. We didn't have white privilege. We just lived in America, where everyone had privilege. We felt entitled, but we were told everyone in America was entitled. Flash forward to 6 or 8 years ago, and I thought I'd seen a lot of progress, both personal and in the wider world. My friends were no longer all white. We had a black president. I led restorative justice groups in a prison. My church had just called a minister who wasn't an old white straight guy. I had faith that the moral arc of the universe was bending towards justice. Then came Trump, Charlottesville, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Sandra Bland, Patrick Loyola. Oh, and our new minister threw in the towel and quit. Ouch. In a racial justice circle, the first two questions are, what happened and what harm was caused? In Buddhism, the first noble truth is often translated as, there is suffering. I prefer the translation that says, the first job is to understand, not to understand, to acknowledge, to see what is happening. To honestly look at what is happening. So what do I see? Well, as a scientist, I've come to believe that there's no actual difference between races, that that's just a convenient construct for the basis of a caste system. And I pat myself on the back for having gotten to this point. And I've also taken some of those online tests of implicit bias, where you have to quickly answer a bunch of questions. And I score moderate to high on racial antipathy. Ouch. It's been hard for me to accept that my lovely little town of Lincoln, which I've personally experienced as welcoming and loving, might not feel that way to a person of color. This is sometimes called white fragility. It's something, if someone gives me feedback on something that I've said or done, can I just hear it? Instead of immediately explaining my intention, can I just hear what the person is trying to tell me with curiosity without evaluating whether they're right, just to hear it? In this spirit, this spring I rewatched Manisha's video. Ouch. I've become more aware of white privilege. It's not so much that the advantages that I've had are bad. They're great. But not everyone in America had those advantages. They still don't. Growing up, I was proud of the way America rebuilt and reinvented itself following the Second World War. Returning soldiers were able to attend college. They were given help in buying homes. But not black soldiers. Ouch. The story I was taught in school went like this. Yes, there were slaves in the South, but we Northerners were all abolitionists, right? I've learned it's not that simple. Rhode Island's prosperity came partially from the slave trade. Yes, by the time the ships got to Bristol, Rhode Island, they weren't carrying slaves. But where did the money come from? The businesses in the town, the shipbuilders, the carpenters that made barrels, the factories that made rum, the banks, the insurance companies, they all existed because of the money. Cotton was planted in the South by enslaved people, right, but not here. But where were the mills that turned that cotton into cloth? They were here. Lowell, Waltham. Washington, Jefferson, Franklin, John Hancock all owned people. Ministers owned people. There were enslaved people in Lincoln and Concord. If I have the story right from Elise Lemire, one of the first persons baptized in this church was an enslaved man. Well, I never thought of the Chambers Russell estate that we now know of the Codman estate as a plantation. Plantations were in the South. But Chambers Russell owned people. Ouch. The Russell family, did you know the Russell family owned an enslaved man named Lincoln when Chambers Russell was growing up? So how did Chambers Russell become fond enough of the name Lincoln to recommend it for this town? I don't know, but it's a more complex story than the one I was told when I moved here. If the first step is to see the world clearly, without delusion, how will that happen if we look away? If we teach our children fables, stories. If lies replace truth, if truth doesn't matter. In some Buddhist communities, every time a bell happens to ring, the monks pause, take a couple of deep breaths, and say to themselves, "Wake up. I'm here. Wake up." We have a huge Black Lives sign out in front of this building. Every time I see it, I think, wake up. May it be so.
Amen. Our second reading this morning is one verse. And if you were to ask me, it's one of my favorite verses. If you were to ask me, Sarah, what's your life verse? I would probably say this one. Odds are. Micah chapter 6, verse 8. God has told you, O mortal, what is good, and what the Holy One requires of you. to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. To do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. Good morning, church. It is so good to be with you today. I am grateful to Joan and to Ben. Thank you so much for sharing pieces of your journey. Thank you so much for sharing pieces of your journey with us. It is a scary thing to do, to be sure, to share vulnerably in this way and talk about the things that we've gotten wrong, talk about the things that we need to learn, the ways that we need to grow and that we have grown, but to recognize that there's still so much further yet to go. But we take a moment to pause this morning and rest on that long journey, recognizing that we have climbed a great hill and there are many more hills to climb. But it's so important that we talk about this in community because on our own we might not realize some things that we're missing. It's in sharing the journey, in covenant relationship, that we can be called into accountability when we get it wrong, that we can be comforted in the relationships that we have with one another when we grow weary and we don't know how to keep going. And we can be strengthened to keep going and rejoice at those victories that we come together and celebrate. Yes, we have come so far, and yet there is a long, long road ahead. And so if you'll permit, I'll briefly share some of my story. Some of you already know. I was raised in evangelicalism, in a fundamentalist group of evangelicalism here in Massachusetts. It was a form of Christian nationalism. We waved an American flag in the sanctuary, and right next to it was the Christian flag, and they shared the same colors, intentionally. I remember every morning going to a Christian school from preschool to 8th grade, and we would every morning say the Pledge of Allegiance to the American flag, the Pledge of Allegiance to the Christian flag, and the Pledge of Allegiance to the Bible. It was our daily liturgy, our ritual. I was raised to believe that America is a Christian nation, that America is God's chosen nation, and in fact, God had ordained its establishment in every way possible. So much so that this Christian school that I went to growing up from preschool to 8th grade had a particular fundamentalist curriculum that I have gone back since and taken a look at, the ways in which they talked about the genocide of indigenous peoples on this land, the ways in which they talked about enslavement and the slave trade. It was always taught in such a way that this was God's will. Yes, mistakes were made. Yes, there was some violence, but you know what? Ultimately, God was using that bad thing to do something good. It was baptized in some sort of narrative to say, ultimately, where we were going was God's will, so everything was fine. You know, if you had asked me when I was growing up, if you had asked us, you know, are you racist? Look at all of this theology that you're teaching. Isn't that racist? You know, we would very quickly point to Genesis 1. No, we believe that God created all humanity. Everyone is made in the image of God. I can very easily see from experience how our theologies, despite what we say with our words, can so very easily my apologies. I am missing like an entire page, and I don't know what happened there. But just to be honest, what's happening here? I can see how the theology that I was raised with, we might say one thing with our words, but we would still cultivate a culture of white supremacy. You can say we believe that all men are created equal, but still create systems and benefits from systems of oppression. You can say we believe that we affirm each person's dignity, but we can still create a culture and a context where whiteness is normative. And if you do not fall in line with what is the widely accepted version of how we are together and who we can be together, that it doesn't always match up if we're not intentional. And so what we're doing today here in listening to these stories and in honoring the work that has been done and remembering the work that continues to need to be done, we are being intentional about that journey. And we are saying, you know what, it's time for me to walk with humility and recognize that I can get things so deeply wrong. You know, for me personally, that recognition came when I was a missionary on the island of Saipan. I graduated, I went to Bible college, I graduated Bible college, became a missionary, and it was in the relationship that I had with the people that I was colonizing, essentially, that I recognized what I was doing was trying to recreate another culture in my own image. And I recognized the violence that I was doing. It's really, really painful to recognize when you've gotten something wrong. But we have all gotten things wrong. Long story short, unfortunately, as must happen, long story short, that recognition of my own failings, my own failures, and the failures of the faith community that I was raised in that talked so much about God's love. The recognition that our words and our actions did not line up. It was a painful thing, but it was that lesson in humility that launched me down my own racial justice journey. And I've been so grateful to continue that journey with all of you. I will conclude with a reading that I do have up here from an author that I am very grateful to, Olufemi O. Taiwo, in his text, Reconsidering Reparations, a book that I highly, highly recommend. And this is an excerpt from his extremely powerful concluding chapter that I think ties together some of the threads that we've heard so far this morning. We should think about our ancestors, but we will win and lose our own ethical battles based on what we do for our descendants. We are defined by what kind of ancestors we choose to be. This perspective is available to everyone. My people's ancestors, in the genealogical sense, include a mix of people who were on right and wrong sides of history. But what makes someone a genuine ancestor in the moral sense is our relationship to them now. On the Yoruba view, whether we pay them respect of a certain kind. There are those who precede us in space and in time whose imprint we reject. And then there are those who came before us whose projects we continue, whose steps order ours. Only these latter ones are our ancestors in the moral sense. What defines our relationship to our ancestors is not what calls they made, but which ones of them that we answer. As Cabral explains, I have the responsibility of deciding which of the paths I inherit are the ones that can lead us upward. That reminds me to face the full truth about the legacies I inherit, but also the full truth about the legacy I am right now creating with my own actions and leaving for those who come after me. If I want to be an ancestor, I should take the kinds of steps worth following and start or continue the kinds of projects worth finishing. Many white people are descendants from slaveholders, colonizers, or collaborators, but many were descendants of abolitionists, conscious dissenters, and their collaborators. Their responsibility is no different from anyone else's. First, to decide which of those paths are available to follow. Second, to decide which of those lead upward toward justice and what actions they can take to make the advancement of that path real. If not tomorrow, then perhaps the day after. Regardless of what we've genealogically or even morally inherited, we can seek upward paths right now with our own actions. We can make our projects and decisions the source of moral inheritance for those who come after us. While many of us owe the responsibility to continue struggles for justice to our genealogical ancestors, all of us, without exception, owe it to our moral descendants, those who inherit the world that results from our successes and failures, regardless of parentage. And he closes, he says, "For better or for worse, our ancestors constructed this world in their image. We owe it to our descendants to rebuild it in a new one." May it be so. And now would you join me in singing our closing hymn, "We'll Build a Land."
Please join, if you wish, in our call to ministry. We go forth from the worship of God to be faithful to the vision of Jesus, to affirm each person's dignity, and to cherish the living earth.
Faithful ones, let us go from here with conviction, with assurance, with humility, and with hope. That even when we can't see it and we struggle to feel it, the kingdom of God is alive within us, and justice will one day be our home. May God be with us today and always as we seek to live out what we say we believe. Amen.
All right. This is the time for announcements, and I'm going to start. Please be seated. Next Sunday, May 1st, the ministerial launch team will make a brief presentation after the service to introduce ourselves and to give a brief overview of the ministerial launch team charter. If you have an announcement, please raise your hand, and one of us will come forward with a microphone.
Hi, I'm Joan Kimball from the Racial Justice Journey and Advocates, and you're all invited to stay here in the sanctuary or on Zoom for a celebration of First Parish's partnership with Bay Cove Human Services and with our beloved Dan Boynton. And this celebration is sponsored by the Racial Justice Advocates and the Outreach Committee. And as our racial justice journey transitions from issues to action, we're looking at other churches to see what they have done, but we also need to look at the First Parish and see what we have done. And so please come and stay and hear what we have done. It's just really wonderful. And then we'll party. So please stay. And if you're on Zoom and you're watching the celebration, please come and party outside and in the Stearns Room. Thank you.
Katie Walker for the search committee, and I wanted to remind you all that candidating week is coming up. This is May 8th to 15th, and there are a lot of different ways that people are going to have an opportunity to meet Kit and Nate. But I wanted to bring to your attention ones that are really open to all. You know, in addition to the 2 services that they'll be leading on the 8th and the 15th, where we'll also have some parties, we're going to have 3 open houses, 2 of them in person, one of them, and then another one on Zoom. They'll be attending the meditation on Tuesdays and also the Quiet Walk on Friday. And Nate will also be teaching a class on Thursday during the time that Sarah Kulkowski ordinarily teaches. So I hope you'll watch the parish news and the website for those announcements and get excited and come meet our new ministers. Thank you.
On behalf of the Outreach Committee, I'm honored to announce the Jean Wood Preston Grants for 2022. Over 40 years ago, a member of this congregation made a bequest to First Parish as the custodian to provide support to charitable causes she and First Parish believed in. The core mission must be to provide services or advocacy consistent with the original gift. Affordable housing, enrichment programs for youth, social justice, protecting our natural environment. Since its origination, that bequest has provided support to dozens of worthy organizations. I'm pleased to announce the recipients for this year. The Boston Area Gleaners, $25,000 to provide farm equipment for the new farm in Acton. The South Sudanese Enrichment Fund, an organization founded in 2000 by Susan Winship, a long-term member of this congregation. $25,000 for educational support and programs for children as they navigate the education system. Gaining Ground, a farm in Concord, $9,000 to improve their farm produce washing station. An Open Table, $6,000 for diversity, equity, and inclusion training for their staff and volunteers. And there'll be more detailed information in the outreach newsletter this week. Thank you.
Good morning. Nancy Henderson for the Flower Committee, and I want to thank Barbara Leggett for the beautiful flowers this morning that she arranged in memory of our friend Tom. And I think it's such a beautiful thing to give flowers as in memory, as a tribute, because it allows us all to remember, in this case, remember Tom. And it brings to mind people who we've loved and lost. And it's just a nice opportunity. So I urge you all to sign up to give flowers. You can contact me, and my information will be in the parish news, or you can contact Sylvia. And it's a very simple thing, but I think it's a very moving thing. Thank you.
Good morning. Barbara Slater for the Racial Justice Advocates. You are all invited to a workshop this Thursday evening on Zoom, and we are going to be discussing the transition from focusing on history and culture around racial issues, racial justice, to action, to what do we do. The focus is going to be centering directions and next steps, and we need your input. So do come on Zoom this Thursday evening, 7 o'clock.
Good morning. Doug Crosby, again, joining with Ralph in Outreach. I just wanted to let everybody know that the work that's been done by our congregation in the collection for care in the Ukrainian situation has been nothing short of extraordinary. It's really wonderful. So it's essentially complete. We have this one last week. If somebody still would like to do something, please either through the website under Give Now in the Easter, or forward a check to the P.O. box for the church. And most importantly, thank you, and we look forward next week to tell you what the results of this are. But it's heartwarming and a wonderful thing we're all doing. So thank you for your support.
One more. Several more. Sorry. Okay, this is Joan Mansfield from the Music Committee. The Music Committee is facilitating a series of music discernment conversations to get the congregation's input into the design of First Parish music program going forward. Zoom links and time details are in this past week's electronic news. If you don't want to spend an hour on Zoom, there's a quick survey you can fill out. The details are, again, in the parish news. So scroll down to the committee updates to find the information. The first Zoom session is tomorrow night, Monday at 7 p.m. And please participate. The music committee needs to hear your voice. Thanks.
Thanks, Joan. Sarah Andresiak. This is the last announcement, I think, for the generous giving team with the weekly stewardship update. First, thanks to Robert for that beautiful trip down memory lane. It's just full of memory and anticipation. That was beautiful. Thank you. Stewardship, we know this, invites each of us to pledge as generously as we can to support this community we love. This year's theme, Weaving the Fabric of Community. Let's all do our part to strengthen and sustain our community fabric. The campaign, we're in our last week of the campaign. So if you've been thinking like, yeah, I need to get to it, now is the time to do your part. I actually have some paper forms, if that would be helpful to anyone, and you can go online, fplincoln.org/donate. We're going to publish the list of pledgers in the annual report and in the order of service in May, later in May, so, if you want to show up, That'd be great. This week, I'm just listing the folks who pledged over the last 2 weeks. Let's join me in holding them close, please. Molly Beard, Pam Boardman and John Kelman, Stephen Brand, John Kurzwicki and Mary Briggs, Juliet Rago McNamara and Christina Rago Brown, Annie Calhoun, Sarah Cannon Holden and Larry Holden, Judy Casarella, Karen Clark, Sue Cornwell, Priscilla Damon, Craig Donaldson, Tally Forbes, Susan Richard Hallstein, Julie Hibben, Tony and Sue Howland, in loving memory of Kenton Ide, Brian and Elizabeth, Joey, Charlie, and Mizzy Mae Kelly, Ginger and Kurt Reiner, Susie Rialt, Sue and Bill Stason, and Peter and Fan Watkinson. Check out the loom in the Stearns Room. Our community fabric is growing. And yeah, I got paper forms. Anybody else want to talk?
Are you sure? All right, here's what we're going to do. In just a minute, Miranda is going to lead us to the transition where those of us who are remaining can settle in for the next portion of the morning's program, and those of us who must leave can do so, covered by Miranda's beautiful music. Let it be so.
Hello. 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 Good morning. Good morning. As you're doing, please continue to take your seats, and we can begin. Thank you. Good morning. My name is Joan Kimball, and I'm a member of the Racial Justice Advocates here at the First Parish. Today's celebration is of the First Parish's partnership with Bay Cove and its founder, Dan Boynton. And it's co-sponsored by the Racial Justice Advocates and the Outreach Committee. We are so pleased to see each of you here and those of you joining us on Zoom. We particularly want to welcome the 11 members of the Boynton family who have joined us. Could you all raise your hands? This is such a wonderful occasion for all of us. And we also want to welcome Dan's twin brother, Dick, and his wife, Lane, and Janet's brother, Thomas, who are joining us on Zoom today. Today, this celebration focuses not only on the past and present, but also on the future, learning ways that we as a church may act to further racial justice. As you all know, this year's racial justice journey has focused on history and some of the unresolved issues that still need to be addressed. And as we begin our next module, Action, it's clear we need to look not only at what other churches are doing for racial justice, but also how the First Parish has taken action. Our co-sponsor of today's celebration, the Outreach Committee, has long been a force in our church working to promote social and environmental justice. I'd like to give them a hand, too. And as a church, an important part of our justice work has been with Bay Cove Human Services, introduced to us by Dan Boynton. Dan is the founder of Bay Cove and served as CEO of Bay Cove for 27 years. Dan is also a long-standing member of the First Parish. In fact, Dan, along with Janet, could be said to be beloved pillars of our church. Dan has inspired First Parish members to create long-standing joint ventures with Bay Cove. 2 of these are Family Furnishings and 50 Families that help families at Christmas. Dan has also inspired First Parish members to serve on the Bay Cove Board of Directors and its Board of Advocates. Bay Cove was established in 1974. For the next 27 years, Dan led Bay Cove's growth from a single alcohol detoxification program to an agency that, at the time of his retirement in 2001, boasted more than 100 programs and 1,600 staff members. What an amazing legacy that you have led. I have the honor to introduce Bill Sprague, President and CEO of Bay Cove Human Services, and Nancy Mahan, Senior Vice President of Services at Bay Cove, who will be speaking. And now I will briefly introduce our Bay Cove speakers. I've been told I must keep this to less than 5 minutes, so I'm going to continue. Bill Sprague has been a force at Bay Cove for 29 years. His career in human services started in direct care, and after earning a master's degree in rehabilitation counseling, he served as a leader at Center House and South Shore ARC. In 1993, Bill joined Bay Cove as Chief Financial Officer. He was named the agency's executive director in 2001 and in 2011 was appointed President and Chief Executive Officer. Over the years, Bay Cove has merged with a number of nonprofits and today encompasses over 170 programs throughout metropolitan Boston and a staff of over 2,000 people. This is really just an amazing program, agency. Nancy Mahan, Senior Vice President of Services at Bay Cove, has worked at Bay Cove since 1979 as Program Director, first of the agency's residential group home for adults with mental illness, and later as the agency Director of Mental Health Services. She developed a continuum of rehabilitation and treatment programs. In 2011, Nancy was appointed Senior Vice President of Services. In this role, she oversees all Bay Cove service programs. We look forward to hearing Bill and Nancy as they highlight the past and share future goals that not only help individuals, but also address the systemic racism that has impacted these individuals. And now, Bill.
Well, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure and a privilege. I greatly appreciate being invited to come and to speak with you and to see Dan and Janet and the rest of the Boyntons and other good friends that Bay Cove and I have had for many, many years. Much of what I was going to start with was part of the introduction, so I can skip ahead a bit. But as was indicated, Dan hired me in 1993. He tried to hire me in 92, but it took a little while, Dan, didn't it? Before we could finally pull it off. But I started working for Dan in 1993 and had the privilege to work with and for him until his quasi-retirement. Dan has been busier in retirement than most people are when they're working full-time. And so after he retired in 2001, came back for several years under an arrangement to take on special projects and lead us in ways that his wonderful wisdom, experience, and expertise allowed, and really only he could do. So with the founding of Bay Cove, and I think the legacy that Dan built and that continues certainly to this day under my stewardship, was a commitment to the principle that everyone has value. At the time of the founding of Bay Cove, people with significant disabilities and behavioral health challenges really could often be pushed aside, neglected, and ignored. And Dan's strong conviction, which started with that everyone had value, as he used to say, there just are no throwaway people. Everyone deserves the treatment and the services that they need. And Bay Cove was founded on the principle that we would serve people with the greatest challenges, that we would serve the people that other agencies couldn't or wouldn't. And 47 years later, I think, I didn't do the math, but around there, we're coming up on 50 pretty soon. That remains an absolute tenet of the way that we approach the work that we do and that we do in continuation of the legacy that Dan left with us. We've grown, we grew under Dan, and we've continued to grow since then. Dan always said that our goal was never to be the biggest agency, our goal was simply to be the best agency. And what we've found is, one, that's never a totally achievable goal, so it keeps you going on and on and on. You can always be better, but striving to be better accomplishes great things. And without a goal of trying to be the biggest, the fact that we did such wonderful service made people want to access our services, made the state want to purchase our services, and really facilitated the growth that was highlighted earlier. From that single program in South Boston, we now have programs across all of eastern Massachusetts. We provide services to 25,000 people a year. We provide services to people with intellectual disabilities, with mental health challenges, with substance use disorder, people who are elderly, people who are homeless, and people who are really in crisis. We hold a number of contracts, emergency service contracts, that are designed to meet people in crisis and to help them get that immediate attention that they need, but then also to make sure that they get into the right types of services and treatment that will help them down the road after the crisis has settled down, but not necessarily all of the issues have been resolved. So much of what we do today is really just a natural continuation of the work that Dan started, and the principles that have been behind it throughout all of these years. My remarks actually got a title, which is something that I think I've said enough times now that it gets attributed to a lot of what I say. But one of the things, again, that has been extremely important, at Bay Cove is that no matter how many people we serve, we're never about numbers. And so though we serve thousands of people every day, we remember to always serve them one at a time, because we know that everybody who comes to us comes with their own set of challenges, their own set of skills, and it's also been extremely important in Dan's founding of this, is that we don't focus on what you can't do, we focus on what you can. And we build on the skills that you have as coping mechanisms for those things that are more challenging to you. And so each person who comes to us, they come with that set of skills, and it's our job to work with them to both identify those skills and then build upon them. And each person who comes to us comes with their own set of goals. And it's not our job to tell people where they want to go in their life. It's our job to help them get to where they want to go. And that's that partnership is part of our mission statement and part of our philosophy. And frankly, the work that I get to do and the work that we get to do, it's a privilege. It really, really is. To have spent as many years as I have, as many years as Dan has and Nancy has, being able to help people and being able to make that kind of a difference in people's lives, there's really no better kind of work to do. So, the founding of Bay Cove, while not being part of a racial inclusive mission, is really very similar. And Nancy will talk more about our commitment in that area. But it's really all about inclusion. And it's really all about the fact that there are so many different people with so many different needs and so many different, approaches. And Bay Cove, initially with, focusing on people with disabilities and challenges in that arena, is really about, again, looking for the things that we have in common and looking for the ways that we can work together and build and grow. So we are proud members of many, try to be all of the communities in which we work. We've never seen ourselves, and again, I attribute a lot of this to Dan, as an entity that comes into a community and does work. We are a part of the community. The people who we serve live in the communities in which we work. The people who do the work at Bay Cove live in the communities in which we work. And so whenever, we're talking to people about, opening a new program, and let's not kid ourselves. Not everybody is excited whenever Bay Cove came to open a new program in the neighborhood. That's not always everybody's first choice about their new neighbors. But Dan taught us early on that we were going to be good neighbors and we were going to be the best neighbors. And many a time I have had a conversation with people and said, there's nothing I can say right now that's going to convince you of this, but I guarantee if we come back and have this meeting in a couple of years, you'll find that what we said was absolutely true. And you'll be glad to have us as neighbors because we care about the same things that you care about. This church has been an incredible partner to Bay Cove. And we don't operate in the Lincoln community. And the fact that you have all contributed your time, your energy, your money in ways to further our mission is obviously an incredible tribute to Dan. But as persuasive as Dan is, you all had to have that in your hearts as well. And so Tucker and probably other members of the community who've been coming to our early intervention center for, I don't even know how many years, Tucker. 22 years. The little kids that they saw are now all adults. And the people that Bay Cove serves are, the purpose of us serving them is their disability and their behavioral health challenges, but the nature of the work that we do and the places that we do it, overwhelmingly they're also poor. And overwhelmingly they're lacking in resources. And what the 50 Families has done at early intervention is life-changing in terms of how those kids and those families experience a holiday season that is more similar to what we look forward to, and very much different than what they would look forward to without the support. So, as an example, and board membership, Peter, Tom, Tucker, it's been an incredible partnership for which we are extremely grateful. The last few years, for everyone, but certainly for Bay Cove, have been extremely difficult. COVID has been life-changing for everyone, everyone here today. But the work that we do, the work that we had to ask our staff to do under the most difficult of circumstances, it doesn't matter if there's a pandemic. People who need treatment continue to need treatment. Several hundred of the people that we serve live in programs that Bay Cove operates. And so you can't go home from there, you are home. And when you're sick, you still need staff to work with you and to take care of you if you're not at a hospital level of care. And so overwhelmingly throughout the worst days of the pandemic, we had to ask our staff to show up for work every day, couldn't do the work from home, to work very closely with people, many of whom got COVID over the course of those first several months. People who already had compromised immune system or other medical challenges. And as Nancy will talk about, this substantial number of our staff are our lowest paid staff, They're not paid what any of us would think they deserve. We're doing our best, but it's an ongoing challenge. They're overwhelmingly women, they're overwhelmingly minorities, and they showed up for work every single day and did an incredible job to keep the people that we serve healthy and continuing to progress in all of the ways they came to us for help. COVID has also, and you've all seen this, thrown considerable curveball at the workforce. And that's been a huge issue at Bay Cove as well. And so we are currently in a workforce crisis that is more challenging than any I've seen in my lengthy career. And so the work's hard enough to start out with, and so many of our staff right now are doing the work of 2 people. It's a hard job to do one, so it's even harder to do 2. But we have an incredible team. We have incredible legacy and seniority at Bay Cove. You heard Dan was here for 27 years, which at that point, obviously, since he was the first staff, that was the record. But Dan, many people have beaten your record since then, I got to tell you. And you'll hear from, I think, the current record holder next, who has been a part of our agency for such a long, long time. And that's a real strength, because many of the people we serve have been with us for many, many years as well. And that lifelong kind of connection and commitment has made a world of difference. So I don't want to go on longer because I want you to hear from Nancy. I want to just again say thank you for all that you have done in partnering with Bay Cove. I want to say thank you to Dan for hiring me and giving me really the kind of the opportunity of a lifetime. Your work while you were there, Dan, was incredible, but the true measure, and I was listening to the woman speak earlier about what we leave for our descendants, and that was more speaking family, but Bay Cove is family. And Dan, what you've left for your descendants at Bay Cove and the way we approach the work that we do and the impact that we continue to have on the people we serve because of the way you started the agency will live forever. Thanks, everyone.
Oh, thanks, Bill. Hi, everybody. I'm Nancy, and I've been with Bay Cove since Dan hired me over 43 years ago. Okay. Well, Bay Cove didn't exist when I was 5 years old. I think I knew I wanted to be part of something like Bay Cove when I was 5. And when I met Dan, I was a college dropout. I had worked at Boston State Hospital. And I knew I really wanted to make a difference. I knew that things could be different than some of the experiences that my family had, or maybe that I had, or people that I had loved had. And I think my first part of my interview was not with Dan, it was with Priscilla Tobey, who was the mental health director at the time, and I actually ran into her at a bar in Harvard Square, and we spent an hour in the women's room talking, and she was like, she said, I want you to come to Bay Cove, but first, Dan Boynton, who's our president, interviews everybody. And you can tell that we were a kind of new and growing organization. And I think as nervous as I was, Dan has a way of making people feel both comfortable and at times quite uncomfortable. But I think I felt comfortable with him, and I think he saw potential in me, and welcomed me. I think he said something like, I think you have some problems, but I think you've got what it takes to work here. At least that's a little bit of what I remember. And you know, I think you were right. You know, I love that Bill talked about the no throwaway people and that the people have value. Because those are foundational pillars of everything that Bay Cove stands on. And while we've expanded and extended that mission more and more, fundamentally that's what we're all about. And it's not always what the world is about. And if you walk into any of the services that Bay Cove runs, you will not find people who have been affirmed in their lives. You just won't. You will find people who have experienced great discrimination. You will find people that have gone to public schools and dropped out at 13, and everybody was willing for them to go because maybe they were just a pain in the ass and a problem. You will find people who have been hated, who have been violated since they were children. You will find people that have been hated because of the color of their skin or their belief system, or because maybe they believe that and know in their hearts that they are a girl and not the boy that their body was assigned to be when they were at birth. We'll find people who are riddled with voices that harass them. And despite the advances we've made in psychiatry and mental health, these voices are hard and they can be frightening, and they can really wield enormous power over people's sense of who they are. And you will find people who have just been forgotten. Walk along Massachusetts Ave and Melina Cass Highway, and you will find people that Bay Cove is dedicated to serving, who deserve every bit as much affirmation, access to care, hope, and the belief that their life can be livable. It is not a livable life now. It is hell. Young girls and young women are trafficked. They are groomed, and they are very ill. And now, if they're 18, they can come to us at our Marisol Center for Healing. And they are recognized for who they are. So anybody who identifies as female, is homeless, has a substance use challenge, and who has been vilified in the world, has a chance to rebuild her life. And we do it within the framework of assertive treatment, profound hope, and harm reduction. So if somebody needs to leave because they have to get that fix, they leave and they are welcomed back. They are welcomed back because they have to begin. We meet them where they are at, and we celebrate with them every choice and step they make, every mistake they make. Because you can get up and you can learn from mistakes, and as long as you are alive at the end of the day, there is hope for you to have a better life tomorrow. And it's not easy. If you are ravaged by fentanyl addiction or by methamphetamine, this is not easy stuff. People come in and they're so medically ill. But mostly their hearts, their souls are broken. And we're here to restore that. And that was stuff that Dan taught me. He taught us that early on. He knew it from his own experience, from his own family. And he helped us celebrate that. And I feel so proud to have been able to learn that when I was 21 and to be part of that. Bill often reminds me that we spend more time with our colleagues and coworkers than we get to with our own families. And Dan always talked about us being a family. And, you know, frankly, we are. I love the people I work with. and who I've worked with. There's times I hate their guts and I want them to change, and I'm sure that they want to shake me to the pits and stuff too. But we do it because it's great love. You can't do any of this alone. And I want to also just acknowledge what you've brought to that, because when our early intervention staff call Tucker, and when a new mom has had a baby and she doesn't have anything, she doesn't have diapers, she doesn't have heat, okay? She doesn't have hope. And within 2 days, a big car arrives filled with things. It means so much. It means so much to our staff. It means so much to that mom. It's like the welcoming baby shower that many of us get to take for granted, right? And it's a beautiful gift. So I'm grateful for all of this. But I wanted to talk to you about our DEI work. But because it's so based on stuff. You know, Bay Cove was based on inclusion. And as Bill reminded all of us, you know, sometimes as humans, we're just not respectful. You know, when you look around the world, when I look at sometimes in my own heart and experience, I'm not always respectful. How do I live without judgment? How do we work in the service of loving people and that sometimes are annoying or are difficult? How do we do it with members of the community that we work with who are spewing racial hate language at staff? How do we do it? Because we've had to learn to do it differently. You know, I was kind of raised where you just ignore it. Easy for me to say, I'm a white woman. You know, nobody ever was calling me the N-word. There were some other words, but nothing hateful. So how do we help our 80% of our direct care staff who are women of color? How do we help them to still stay present? And we have to help them because it's not like we go kicking people out of our programs. There's some we might at times want to because we don't know what to do. We don't know what to do yet that'll make a difference all the time. But we don't kick people out of our programs. But we do set limits. We do set parameters. We do have consequences. And some of those consequences are you bring people back together. We reach out first to the staff and acknowledge that they have been assaulted, that this is an assault that hurts, that is painful, that is hateful, and that is part and parcel of a culture that has embraced and been built on racism. Okay. We don't have to have nooses around. People know. You just hurl that N-word at somebody and you hurl it enough. We had one staff who once said, I've been called a monkey one too many times. I can't do it anymore. And her supervisor rushed to the program and took her to breakfast and then drove her home. And she didn't come back. She did not come back, but we did everything possible to help her know that this was about the world. This was about a hateful world, and that we were sorry, we were concerned, we recognized how she had been wronged. And then we had to go back to the person who said it and said, you know, what you did was crummy. What you did wasn't okay. Of course you're welcome back. But if you do that again, when you use those kinds of words to be so hateful to staff, you're going to have to leave for a bit. You're going to have to take a walk. This was at one of our low-threshold places where people are just in for the night and they sleep on the floor. And if somebody needs to be Narcan because they've overdosed, the staff respond and take care of them. And if somebody needs help with a shower because they haven't had one in a month, staff take care of them. But we have to say, What you did was disrespectful, and you must feel that disrespect for yourself. And maybe there's a darn good reason why you hate other people. But here, we don't quite say what I say at home, that this is a house of peace. I've tried that at Bay Cove programs. It doesn't always work. But we try to say it, that we are a place where we're working on respecting each other. We're a place where that's an expectation of everybody. And we're going to give everybody a chance to learn the skills to do that, because maybe you've never been taught how to speak respectfully to others. Maybe you don't know that. Maybe that's deep inside you. We'll give you more chances, but we expect this to stop. One of the things that we've learned is that in this, we've always been about inclusion. I mean, Bay Cove, everything about Bay Cove. We took people out of the state hospitals. We took them out of the jails for Andrew House. You know, we really have tried. Early intervention, when I first was there, I think early intervention was the second program of Bay Cove. Is that right, Dan? Yeah. And I remember first reading one of the grants that had funded the service, because I was supervising the program. And it was about how South Dorchester was considered a public health death zone. So I didn't know anything about public health then. And I didn't really understand what a death zone was, but I read more, and it talked about the rates of infant mortality. It talked about the rates of women of color who died at birth. It talked about the rates of people who died by suicide. It talked about the rates of people who died by homicide. It talked about lead paint. It talked about the high incidence of asthma and heart disease in those communities. And it talked about things that were just kind of new information to me. Now we know that zip code makes a difference. If you've grown up in Roxbury or Mattapan, your average life expectancy in 2016 was 51, about 50, okay? It got up a little bit higher, and then it's gone down since the pandemic. If you take a bus to the Back Bay, 2 miles away, the average life expectancy is 92. That is 33 years. 33 years. That's disgraceful. That's what racism does. That's what poverty does. That's what not having good green spaces do. That's what poor education and poor employment opportunities do. That's what social policies do. And we see ourselves, we have responsibility with that. We do. And now I think that we recognize at Bay Cove that we have to help people not feel responsible, or, people feel really yucky about themselves. They feel really crummy when they come to us many times. They feel like a piece of crap. And it's and sometimes you just want to say, this isn't your fault. This is not your fault. You weren't born in the world to feel this way. No universe, no God that any of us know or love or encounter or whatever would ever have this be for us or for you. This has to do with opportunities that haven't been made available. This has to do with the stress that you've lived under, that your family has borne. You are worthy of far more. And thank God you're here. So we try to say to people when they come in off the street or when they come into home from a lousy day, we're glad you're here. We want our staff to say that. Do they always? Nah. But some of us around reminding them all the time and trying to just surge that kind of, so much of the work is about treatment. So much of it is about love, so much of it is about respect. And our DEI work changes that. So now we know that we have to be disruptors. We have to be disruptors in the system, and we have to remind our clients about it. We've formed partnerships with the African Bridge Network because we know that we want to have people working in our programs that are representative. We want to have leaders in our programs that are representative of the communities that we serve. And we want to be able to tap every potential talent to come to work at Bay Cove. It's been a wonderful partnership with us. They've helped us to really bring many talented folks who are working in our communities who come from parts of the really more Nigeria, Ghana, many parts of Africa. And we look to celebrate what they bring. Many of them are very, very well educated. Their schools aren't recognized here in the United States in the same way, but they're good, wonderful people. We are very lucky to have people coming from different parts of the world to kind of join our teams. Our DEI work really centers on, Bill formed a steering committee after, when George Floyd died and was murdered by police. We heard so many stories from our staff and clients about their terror of calling the police. I grew up in Malden. I was a white kid. I still am a white woman, right? I was never afraid of the police. I never had reasons to be afraid of them. But 3/4 of the people who work in our programs or who get served in our programs are terrified of the police. And so we try to figure out, how do we work effectively with the police to, when we need their support in helping someone be safe. It's not always easy. So these are challenges that our committee works on. We're working on, we started with 50 staff that got to join a program with the YW on Uncover Boston that helps people to break down and address racism within our communities, our social policies. And I think 37 people have been able to stay engaged. It's been hard with the pandemic. It's been hard. It's been hard because staff are so stretched doing these 2 jobs, as Bill describes. So we have a lot of good things going on that are doing this, and we're building a lot of energy. We have a great new series called Diversity Discussions that one of our senior leaders is doing, where she interviews some of our staff of color and talks about, what brings you to Bay Cove? Why do you do this work? What excites you about what you do? What joy do you bring? And it's been wonderful to see 50 other staff taking a break for an hour to join these Zoom conversations and cheer and celebrate the work of our staff, that we're looking to really help people feel included, feel respected, feel admired, and also emerge as leaders within Bay Cove. So we're excited about the work we're doing. There's a lot of stuff. I could always send you stuff and tell you more, but I know I've talked probably too long. But again, I think that the messages that Dan really inspired and his family, because I feel like I've kind of grown up with many of you, is that, if there are really indeed no throwaway people, we are all the same. We are far more alike than we are different. And we have a responsibility because we matter to each other. And what greater gift is that? So thank you for all you do for Bay Cove and for our lovely Boynton family. and we're very grateful. Thank you.
Good morning again. Well, thank you both for sharing. That was just enlightening and so meaningful. And I'm delighted to speak to you all on behalf of Jenny this morning. So this is a message from Reverend Jenny, read by myself. Dear friends, a long-planned family trip to New York City means I cannot be with you in person this morning. And I'm so sorry to miss this terrific celebration of Bay Cove. As a Unitarian Universalist minister working in the Boston area for 30 years, I have long known the work of Bay Cove and respected it immensely. What a surprise it was for me to come to Lincoln as an interim minister and realize that Dan Boynton, Bay Cove's founder, was in the congregation. I remember early conversations with Dan where he told me about the beginnings of the organization and how it tried to have an open arms policy towards everyone, taking in and helping people that other agencies had turned away. I found that very moving. As someone who has experienced the effects of mental health and substance abuse disorder in my own family, I have a personal awareness of some of these issues although each situation, of course, is unique. I am deeply grateful for Bay Cove and its outreach to those who need help in one form or another. The truth is, I think we all need help at some point in our lives. For ourselves, for our families, and if we are lucky, we find the Dan Boyntons and Bay Coves who can accompany us through the storm and help to become our strength and stay for a while we begin to pull the pieces back together. Acknowledging the realities of structural racism and systemic issues nonetheless, as we join together as partners in this work in a spirit of equality and collaboration, rather than one party being somehow better and others less than. Each human person carries brokenness and frailties, as well as love and strength and compassion and potentialities still unrealized. I give thanks for Bay Cove's work to restore a sense of basic human dignity, give individuals tools to move, if they can, toward healing, as well as its commitment to raising up and working on the underlying social issues. For me, getting to know Dan Boynton and his family has been one of the great blessings of my time here. Sitting with Dan and listening to his felt sense of the presence of the holy, well, it doesn't get much better than that for a minister. What a gift. I will always remember the day he said a prayer for me. God, he said, I pray that you would visit Jenny deeply. I will not forget those words. Dan has carried that same blessing and prayer to so many over the years, and we and Bay Cove have been changed as a result. Thank you.
Oh, I remember being here in this sanctuary, and I think it was 1997, and I heard you speaking and others about the work that you have done at Bay Cove, and I just went, whoa, this is wonderful and amazing. As I have a very dear brother who I've lost, who had schizophrenia, and I spent, decades loving and trying to help him as best I could, and then to learn of you and your mission, well. Every day darts rained down on Dan, so many he could not count. He pulled them out, studied them closely. Where, why, what for, he did shout. He didn't let this darkness blind him. Sea of sadness in he dove. He worked to provide care for others, making a horror called Bay Cove. Most precious is all the loving devotion to those most in need. All staff devoted to the mission, inspired by Dan endlessly. We all are here to celebrate, to thank you for your vision and skill. Your light guides our lives and our purpose, building the city on the hill. Most precious is all the loving devotion to those most in need. All staff devoted to the mission, inspired by Dan endlessly, cherishing eternally Dan's blessing, sweet as can be. Let's share with all humanity. Thank you, Dan.
Peter, that was beautiful. Dan, what a joy to be able to reflect on the many, many gifts that you have given to me and that you've given to so many, including the incredible colleagues of yours at Bay Cove. I want to open by reflecting first that Dan and I share several things in common. And they include that we went to the same college, include that we are both experienced in having worked in very lucrative careers and making decisions in our lives to go from making a lot of money to making a lot less money. And the third thing that I wanted to lift up, which I confirmed this morning, is that we are both number 3s on the Enneagram. And I celebrate that point to reflect on the extraordinary genius of always learning about yourself. And in so many ways, Dan has been a Sherpa for me, invoking from our service this morning the high hills that Nelson Mandela climbed. To have a Sherpa like Dan in my life is important. And I wanted to offer a reflection about a time that took place about 20 years ago, give or take 1 or 2. And for those of you who have been to the Great Meadows in Concord, what a beautiful, beautiful refuge to watch birds and listen to the bird song. But what an also beautiful place to go for a walk with Dan. And I was at a point in my life where I was wrestling with whether and how and could I make the transition from a lucrative, high-paying job to one where I would be more in the less paid, more service category. And again, the genius of Dan was to remind me that there are a lot of jerks in the nonprofit world, Tom, and perhaps there are more jerks there than there are in the world you're leaving. And that wisdom has set with me for many years and has served as a guide as I've tried to navigate through some of those tricky relationships. The opportunity to serve on the Bay Cove board coincided with Dan's retirement. And it was a window for me to witness the creative genius of Dan in an organization that, as we've heard this morning, has done so much for so many. And in addition to witnessing the stories of risk management for a gentleman released from Bridgewater State Hospital living in a residence, and the enormity of crisis that that individual was experiencing, and the challenges of bringing services to bear to meet that person's needs, I saw Dan do something really important. He stepped back and created space for Stan Connors to assume the leadership. And watching Dan, who, as Bill alluded to, probably increased his hourly quota by 25% to celebrate his retirement, was just extraordinary to watch him navigating the challenge of stepping back and letting others lead. And so for me, as I reflect on the lessons that Dan has given me, that too, learning how to be a leader from the side or from behind is really important. And then the third and last thing that I just wanted to lift up is, as Bill described, in nearly 30 years, he's picked up a lot of that extraordinary DNA. For me, I've picked up a little bit of it. And it's through the time that I've spent with Dan that I've learned some of the qualities that have been alluded to. And I never thought that I would quote or try to quote Sarah from Micah. But what a beautiful thing to talk about justice, mercy, and humility. And what a wonderful gift that Dan has given me, has given Bay Cove in this incredibly big, wonderful, broken world of ours. And I just want to say thank you, Dan. Thank you for everything that you are, everything that you will be, and for all the gifts that you've showered on each and every one of us.
Hi, this is my first time back in the sanctuary. See, Dan, you make me do amazing things. I'm Susan Taylor, and I'm here to tell how all of this that we've heard about and Dan has actually impacted the outreach work that the church does. I'd like to tell you how I saw the experience that Dan brought from Bay Cove directly impact First Parish's own outreach for social justice. And it's, in addition, at the end, it gives me a chance to tell my favorite Dan Boynton story. So, we'll go back to, I had just taken on the chairmanship of the outreach committee that you heard Doug and Ralph talk about today. Larry Puel sitting there with me, and I didn't know what I was doing, and I begged Dan, because I had heard about his good work, and he was hesitant to agree to volunteer. He had served before, back in the 90s, when the committee was called Social Concerns, and he had just finished a big post-retirement project for Bay Cove, and he wanted time to reflect. But I was so desperate that he agreed. Thank goodness, and thank you, Dan, because that was the year that the outreach committee learned there had been a missing link in the transition from social concerns. The $50,000 that Jean Wood Preston had left the church in trust for social justice grants had gone unnoticed for a decade. And by the time we found out the fund existed, it had grown to $650,000. The last grant had been a $9,000 gift to Bay Cove in the year 2000. Well, I panicked. How can a little group of 7 rotating volunteers manage that kind of money? Well, Dan knew. He rolled up his sleeves, and he partnered with Joan Kimball, another recent retiree with professional experience with grants. And they figured out a process for allocating the Preston funds responsibly and reliably, and Dan stayed on to stabilize it for several years. And because of Dan's foundational leadership, the First Parish, as you heard this morning, still has the honor of awarding substantial annual Preston grants. Dan's rule of thumb was the cost of a new boiler or a new vehicle, to lift up local nonprofits that work with our community's most vulnerable, and to form lasting partnerships between our church and organizations that we learn about through this process. And some of these have included, in addition to Bay Cove, the Community Day Center in Waltham to install a kitchen in their shelter for people who are homeless and addicted. The Boston Area Gleaners, you see we still have a relationship with them, for their very first truck to carry the produce that they gather left behind in harvested fields and take it to food pantries. And Farrington Nature Link to winterize a barn so children from low-income city neighborhoods, most of color, many immigrants, could share in the experience of nature all year. But always at the heart of Dan's administrative and leadership talents, as we have heard over and over, remained the person-to-person connections he knew from his successes and struggles at Bay Cove that trusted relationships are essential for healing and recovery. One of the requirements that Dan and Joan built into the Preston process was a site visit. No matter how impressively written the application, there was nothing like observing a program in person and speaking with the clients. And Dan and Janet could always be counted on for the service days that reinforced these partnerships, whether it was the annual spring cleanup at Farrington Nature Link or the long tradition, the pre-pandemic tradition, of the First Parish serving a hot lunch on MLK Day at the Community Day Center. Which leads me to my favorite Dan story. One of these MLK days when we were serving lunch in the new kitchen at the Waltham Center, we were encouraged, and as we always were there, to eat and converse with the clients, most dealing with addictions, many sleeping rough under bridges and parking garages. Dan was so comfortable and so easily able to relate with dignity and genuine interest that folks began to feel free to confide. They started giving Dan tips on where to get a coat and a haircut, and who was giving out backpacks and sleeping bags this week. He suddenly realized they thought he was sleeping on the streets too. And afterwards, Dan told us, he said, well, I didn't want to tell them. And then I thought, well, in a way, that is an honor. It is an honor, Dan. And you have honored us with your time, talent, skill, and sensitivity to putting our privileges to use in expanding human dignity and love for all. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Mary Jo Vealing. My connection with Dan Boynton and Bay Cove predates my move to Lincoln, my membership in First Parish, and maybe even the dinosaurs. In my 40-year career working for the Department of Developmental Services for the state of Massachusetts, I worked with over 120 agencies across Massachusetts. The staff of Bay Cove were always caring and provided exceptional support to people who, let's just say, needed a little help from our friends. I loved what Nancy and Bill said about there are no throwaway people, and you serve one person at a time. We all need help from time to time. Some Bay Coast staff even went to the Framingham State program, which I coordinated in the late 80s and 90s of the last century. Seems like just yesterday. I'm not saying I loved, because I always didn't, going down to 66 Canal Street with heavy equipment and getting into that really rickety elevator. Going up to the 6th floor, you know, back in the day, but it was never about the building. It was always about the people. It was always about the kind, thoughtful people and the collaboration with DDS, state agency. I have to put that good word in. This is really due to Dan's leadership, the leadership of Bay Cove, and so a big, big thankful something, I'm losing my train of thought, to Dan and to Janet and the whole Boynton family. Thank you so, so much.
Good morning. I first wanted to say you guys were very modest this morning. Not one of you mentioned that you were one of the best places to work, written up in the Globe for many years. So in 2000, Peter, I couldn't wait for Dan Boynton to stop talking. He was talking about this place called Bay Cove, and I thought, my God, this service is lasting forever. That's because I was sitting in my seat looking cool as a cucumber, but in fact, I was jumping up and down in my seat, thinking, oh my gosh, my dreams have been answered. 50 families had started 3 years prior, where we were taking things into letters to Santa through the post office, which really wasn't ideal. Dan Boynton is talking about this program with service coordinators helping children with special needs and in need of love. So after the service, I went running up to Dan and I said, could we do Christmas for early intervention? And in fact, we have for 22 years. So on that day, when you did speak, Tom Hazlett and Peter Pease and I were in the audience, and we went on to become board members, and that has changed my life, enriched my life. You all know me, I'm a crier. Anyway, I think from that one day that Dan was up here speaking, probably 4,000 children and their families have benefited from your talk to us when I sat in that same pew over there. Whew. Anyway, serving on the board has enriched my life, as I said, but knowing you, a true hero to thousands and thousands of Bay Cove family, has been the greatest gift of all. Thank you, Dan. And I forgot. Dan, I am going to deliver this to you now, a little book of love from all your friends. And read it again, because there's just so much love to you in this book.
have only one closing remark, and that is wow. Thank you to our guests, to Bill Sprague and Nancy Mahan. Thank you to Jenny and Sarah. Thank you to Tucker and Mary Jo and Susan and Tom and Peter. My heart is very full, and thank you, of course, above all, to Dan. None of this would have happened without the just surge of enthusiasm that we felt when we proposed this event, and none of it would have happened without the organizational efforts of Joan and Mary Helen and Tucker, and the amazing, indomitable Jackie Lenth, who has a marvelous reception for us outside. We hope you will join us and talk with Bill and Nancy, ask questions, and share the love with the Boynton family. We're so glad you're all here. Thank you so much. I just want to add one thing, and that is that we're very sorry that David Hirschberg, Bay Cove's Vice President for Development and Senior Officer for Strategy, took ill yesterday and has been unable to join us. He was really our partner at Bay Cove for organizing this event, and we miss him and send him good wishes. I hope you're all hungry because there's a lot of food. Thank you again.
All right. Okay, good. All right, let me come down. Wow, this is the first time.
Like I'm talking